Believe in y'all. So we've got some wise folks over here on the right. Brother Tate's coming up to share his wisdom here as well. So we'll get going with that. I need to start with a volunteer from each side, someone to be our pointer. Does someone over here want to volunteer to be a pointer? Vanessa immediately put her head down, which usually from the teacher response is kind of where you immediately zone into. Vanessa, I'm going to start with you. That's right. Y'all feel free to pass it around, though. And you're going to go home? I thought you said you were feeling good today. And Tracy, you got volunteered last week, and unless Danny gets called on to security duty, does it seem appropriate that maybe Danny be the pointer for this side today? Is that right? I'm on the wrong side. Is that right? It's just this top button right there. You press and hold that at the screen. Okay. You want to test it out and it'll come up with a little purple dot. No. Nothing's happening right now. Let's see. There you go. You see that? So yours is only digital, where Vanessa, yours is just the center button. Try pressing that up there and see if you can get your red dot to, all right, perfect. So as we mentioned last week, we're in review for Lesson 5 today, which is a look back to Lessons 2 through 4. And rather than just me, what is this? And then you saying it's this, and me saying, wow, that's awesome, and then moving on, making this somewhat a little bit more, we'll use the word competitive, and we'll go back and forth between sides. So if you've got your workbook with you, this is an open workbook type of review. If you've got your knowledge with you, if you've got your Bible with you, this is an open Bible book review as well. So let's have our Bibles, let's have our workbooks ready to go. Our Bibles we'll maybe just use from time to time, spreading out with a little bit of options for, if you want to add a passage or if you want to look at something and try to remember a name from, maybe you don't have a workbook with you, but you remember the name of something, you can look it up in your scriptures. We'll go from there. We're going to begin this morning by doing some review of mountains and the names of people in the land, look at the bodies of water, look at the nations we've talked about, some of our distances we'll go through somewhat quickly, cities, and then various territories and trade routes as well. You know what, before you get too situated, when's your birthday? Oh, it's in March, so you're on the right side then, I think. No, you're supposed to be over here, but we'll let you stay over there. We're divided by birthdays today, so. But feel free, if you want to scoot back closer to your little clump over there, you can feel free to scooch back, rather than you being so far from that way, you all can thank you, cannot collaborate, that's not a real word. But so let's start off with, we'll start over here on our right side team. This is my left, y'all's right. Thinking about some of our mountains that we've been talking about and want to identify. So we're going to just simply list up a question or a statement that you can try to identify. So class from over here on this side, this mountain is snow-covered year-round. What mountain would that be? Mount Hermon, that's right. So Vanessa, can you identify with your laser pointer for your team about where that would be? How's she doing, class? There you go, up there northwest of the Sea of Galilee. I need to be close to my pointer so I can give us a response. How's that? Right there. So, good job, Mount Hermon. Over here on this side, this mountain is famed for its cedars. What mountain is famed for its cedars? What? Which one was that? Lebanon. Mount Lebanon. So, Danny? You've got our pointer for this side. You know where Mount Lebanon is? Someone feel free to help Danny out if you need to. Right up in that area. So we take this off, identify Mount Lebanon. Pretty close, right there. There we go. Let's move on to our next one. Right team, just out into the Mediterranean. What mountain is that? Mount Carmel, or Caramel, I guess, depending on how you say that. Where is that? Right there, perfect, as it's jutting out there into the Mediterranean, like we see on our map. Over here, on our right, on our team left side, lies immediately east of the city of Jerusalem. The Mount of Olives, right? Feel free, anybody who's not named Glow, to also speak up on this side and participate. So that's going to be to the east of Jerusalem. Right around there. Very good. Tracy, can you think of a story that takes place at the Mount of Olives?
Caught me off guard.
I know I did. That's all right. Somebody help him out. Mount of Olives story. where he prayed. Who? Who's he? Jesus. That's probably a good he when we're talking in Bible class. Very good. These are the twin mountains here on the team right side. Twin mountains either side of the city of Shechem. Those would be... and Mount Gerizim. That's right. And those are be located approximately there in the center of the area. So Shechem would be right between there. What happens at these two mountains? Why are these two mountains listed together? Anyone? They're close together. There you go. That's why they're listed together. So the people are going to pass through these mountains. And in Deuteronomy 27, Moses talks about what are they going to do as they pass through the mountains. They're having a snowball fight. This is not a snowball fight that we're talking about. What are they receiving from the mountains? One side is blessings. The other side, it's curses. That's right. In Deuteronomy chapter 27, they're going to be going into the land, and part of the conquest is going to be them passing into Shechem. And as they go through those mountains, or go in between those mountains, the tribes are going to split, and part of the tribes are going to be on one mountain, half of the tribes are going to be on the other, and they're going to proclaim these blessings and curses on one another. That's where that's going to take place. More mountains to look at and identify. I think we're over here on our left side team. This is the range of mountains west of the Jordan. So this isn't one particular mountain, but a range of mountains. Do you remember that term? This would be from, I think, lesson 3. What was that, Danny? Yep, right there. This is the Lebanon range. I'll give you the next question. This is the range of mountains then on the east side of the Jordan. So it's going to be right on the other side of the river. Rather than the Lebanon range, this would be the anti-Lebanon range. Think of the opposite of that here as well. All right, we're going to stay on this side one more time. This is our left side team. The Jordan begins at the base of this mountain. What mountain would that be? It's snow-covered year-round. I'll give you that hint. Mount Hermon, right? Danny, where is that again? Somewhere around there, right? Pretty close. There you go. Everybody happy with Danny's point? Anybody say they can do better than that? They want to take it away from them? No? They said, I hope so. There you go. All right, back over here to the team right side. Moses died here. Okay, Danny, feel free to shout from the back if you know this one, or help out your team over on this side. We need a second clicker or a battery for my mic. What mountain did Moses die on? Nebo. That's right. Where's Mount Nebo? It's on
east of the Dead Sea.
East of the Dead Sea. You got an approximation for us, Vanessa? About even with it. Right there. Right at the top. There we go. All right. Thank you. All right, let's move on from mountains and identifying maps for a moment to talking about names of the people and names of the land. So over here, team left side, someone in the back half from behind the Crosslands and the Williams, feel free to answer this question. Feel free to answer all the questions up here. This name comes to us from the Romans. It just popped up for a second. What was that? Palestine. Let's go to the next one since you all got that too. The land is called this because God promised it to Abraham.
Promised land.
The promised land. There you go. Tracy got that one. He can pick up on that. There we go. This side, over here on the right, the land so called because Abraham's descendants did inherit the land. The land of Israel. And why do we call it the land of Israel?
Because it's the descendant
Of who was named Israel? Who got their name changed to that? Jacob did. That's right. There we go. So we have the land of Israel. Put that up again. The name means stranger or foreigner. That'll be Hebrew. All right, let's go to, while thinking more about names of people and land. People from the southern kingdom of Judah were first called by this name. Over here?
Edomites.
Not Edomites. That's the southern kingdom, but not the southern kingdom of Judah. People were first called Judeans. Close. Jews. That's right. They first started being known as Jews in that area. This is the descendants of Jacob. They are known as Israelites. Very good. Land so called because a particular branch of Ham's descendants that settled there. So based in Genesis 9 and Genesis chapter 10, the land of Canaan. That's right. We call it that. God refers to it as the people who live there as the Canaanites, or the Canaan land. And then over here, this would be the name that we call the Hebrews or the Israelites or the Jews today. Most commonly, they're referred to as Jews. That's right. So those are some of our names of people and land we've talked about. We'll use those somewhat interchangeably from time to time as we talk about these different places. Let's talk about bodies of water. We're over here on our left side again. This is the main river of the land. The Jordan River. Where's the Jordan River? It's kind of straightened out for us in this particular picture, but that's it right there. This body of water empties into the Dead Sea from the east. So this is one of our rivers down here towards the bottom of where the Dead Sea is. What river empties in from the east? The Arnon or the Arnon. So that would be about here in that particular area. Very good. Our next question is, this river flows into the Dead Sea from the south. So rather than from the north, like the Jordan or the Arnon from the east, the Zenid or the Zered, however you say that. So that's coming from the south, would be just south of the Dead Sea there. This next question about a body of water over here to this side drains the western portion of the valley of Jezreel. I'll put that up there for you so you can see. This river drains the western portion of the valley of Jezreel out to the Mediterranean Sea. The Kishon River, very good. Where would that be? Where's that, Donnie?
I'm thinking, is it that one that's in between Zerad and
No, we're up a little bit as we're getting close to the Mediterranean. There you go, out by Mount Carmel. That's right, up in this area. I think just north or around Mount Carmel there. So, continue with some bodies of water. This is the world's lowest freshwater lake. The world's lowest freshwater lake. Over here.
Sea of Galilee.
Sea of Galilee. There you go, Tracy. That's confident. Very good. Did I give you a chance here? Where's our Sea of Galilee? Right there. I think we all probably know that one. Over here, this is called the Great Sea in the Bible. What would be known as the Great Sea? The Mediterranean, that's right. So the Mediterranean Sea, very obviously, that big body of water to the left of our map, or to the west of our map, if we want to use our direction terms. Over here, this lake is no longer on our map, but this lake has been drained. What lake was that? Do we remember? Starts with an H. Hula? I don't know exactly how we want to say that. Where would that be?
Way up north.
Up north of the Sea of Galilee. That's right, somewhere up there. It's not listed on our map anymore. It doesn't exist, but it used to be right up there. Over here, this is the lowest point of land on. This is the lowest point on land found on earth, I think is how that question is phrased. The Dead Sea. That's right. And where's our Dead Sea? Right there. I don't know why there's water going through. I think that's supposed to be one continuous picture. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's the area of the Dead Sea right there. Some more bodies of water. I think this is our last page of bodies of water questions. This name means middle of the earth. Over here, left side team. It's a body of water that means middle of the earth, assigned by the Romans. It's not the Shire. It's not Mordor. That's a Lord of the Rings joke for Middle Earth people. There you go. What body of water means middle of the earth?
Mediterranean.
The Mediterranean, that's right. So we've already had that one. It's a little bit of a tricky question because we've seen it before. This wadi, or that's another term for a brook or a river, that formed Israel's southern boundary on the coastline. Now, this is one we didn't talk about a whole lot over here, right side team, but what body of water would be the southwestern border of the land of Israel? Do we remember, or do we know that from, I think that's lesson 3, we talked about that briefly. That's a land, that's the Araba. The body of water here is known as the River of Egypt. So that one I'll help you all out with. We didn't talk about that a whole lot. That's not the Nile. It's a river that's known as the River of Egypt. That would be kind of the southeastern boundary. Over here on the right side, the Bible name for the Dead Sea. So it's not always referred to as the Dead Sea. Sometimes it's called Salt Sea, that's right. The Salt Sea is also there. We've looked at that and identified that before. Final body of water question over here on our right side. The river between Mount Lebanon and the hills of Galilee. So we've got some geography identifications up in the north there, but this river is kind of a physical boundary that keeps Israel from ever extending up into Phoenician territory. Do you remember the name of this particular river? It forms boundary as well. What does it start with?
L.
Starts with an L. We'll give you that. The
Leontes.
Leonitz? I don't know how to pronounce it either. So we'll have to all take a field trip and we'll find out together someday. So last week we talked about the Salt Sea or the Dead Sea. And what's one of the interesting facts about the Dead Sea when it comes to the rest of other places of water? Like if I go jump in my in-laws' pool, I'll float if I hold my breath. But what's different about the Salt Sea or the Dead Sea? It's a high point, or it would be high buoyancy or low buoyancy. Whatever one means, you can float real well. Right? I talked last week about Benjamin Lee floating in there, but I didn't have that picture. And thankfully, Erin is here today, and we have been provided this picture. You can see her floating in the Dead Sea there like that. You can thank your parents for that, Erin. They provided that for us to get a little bit of visual representation. You're not like trying to stay afloat in that picture, are you? I mean, you're just hanging out and are just floating there. It's about how far deep? About a foot deep. That's right. Oh. All right, let's move on from bodies of water into some of our nations. I think we're over here now because we just talked about the Leonets River. Over here on our team left side, these are the people who controlled the land between the Arnon River and the Zered River. Someone from the back half? Any contribution? Cody, Mike, anyone else? This group of people who controlled the land between the Arnon and the Zered. The Moabites. So where would the Moabites be? Where is that location?
East of the Dead Sea, down south.
Southeast of the Dead Sea in this particular area, right there. There we go. Over on this side, I didn't give Danny a chance. I jumped the gun a little bit on that one. Over here? Yeah. Yeah. Over on this side, this group of people control the southern coastal plain. So that coastal plain, speaking of the Mediterranean Sea, what group of people would that be? Mr. Roy, you got that one for us? It starts with a what? No, that's all right. So let's see. Who would be the people that control the southern... The Philistines. That's who we're thinking of. Right in between Judah and those who are right along the border of the sea would be mainly the Philistines. Eventually, the Philistines do get kind of destroyed by Judah, or seem to be very well put in control, but that's who we're thinking of. We're thinking of that group there. Over here, they turned to sea trade very early because their coastal plain was very narrow. So in the northern part of our land of Canaan and Israel and Palestine, these are the group of people who are also dealing along the sea, but they're not the Philistines, they're Phoenicians. That's right. What are our Phoenician cities that we know from the Bible? This is extra. Tyre and Sidon. We'll come back to them in a little bit, but that's right. Those are usually when we're referring to the Phoenicians. Doesn't seem very often the scriptures will say all the Phoenicians. They may use Tyre and Sidon as kind of a monotony. Is that the right literary term when you use a big group or is represented by a small thing, or a small thing is represented by a big thing? I obviously aced in English class, and so I remember those things so well, but you know those examples that sometimes will be used like that. More of our nations, over on this side, they lived on the edge of the desert. So right by the edge of the Arabian desert would be what group of people? The Ammonites. The Ammonites, that's right. And then over here, Mount Seir was their stronghold. Not the Moabites. Edomites, there you go. We got the Edomites down there, southeast. of the Dead Sea. This nation claimed Bashan very early in Israel's history. So north of all those rivers on the east side of the Jordan, what nation would be there mostly claiming the territory of Bashan?
Reuben, Gad, and Ephraim.
So we would have had eventually Israel having some stake in that area, but what foreign nation would have had control of that area of Bashan before, or mainly around their time period? We're thinking about the Syrians in this particular moment. Remember, our three main eastern empires early on in Israel's history, we had the Syrians, and then who comes after the Syrians? The Assyrians, two different groups, and then after the Assyrians is not Samaritans. Who comes from the east after the Assyrians? Who comes before the Persians? Starts with a B and rhymes with Shmabbalon. Babylon, that's right. The Babylonians are the Chaldeans within that section. Quickly thinking about distances, this is just going to be a free-for-all. If you know these distances, feel free to shout them out. How far is the distance from Dan to Beersheba approximately? It's something we talked about in lesson 2. 150 miles. So what's 150 miles from here approximately? If we want to say from Longview to Fort Worth, Dallas, something like that. That's basically all the extent of the northern-south borders is all they knew from that particular territory. What about from Mount Hermon to the Dead Sea? Approximately how far, we'll say, as the crow flies, I think is one way to put this, from Mount Hermon to the Dead Sea. Close, 120 miles. So from there, from Mount Hermon to the Dead Sea, 120 miles there. This is the length of the Great Rift Valley. So the Jordan Valley that we talked about last week is part of what's known as the Great Rift Valley that extends up into Asia and goes down even into the eastern parts of Africa. And that's a total length of a valley or this rift where there's these, if I remember right, these two plates are meeting together. That's why we have this rift. It's approximately 4,000 miles total. What about the width of Canaan in the northern part? So we've got 150 miles long, but in the north, about how wide is it?
30 miles.
About 30 miles. So 30 miles from here would be Tyler-ish. That's right, maybe a little bit short, but it's on that. So what about at the southern part? The southern part. Let me get that up there for everybody else. Maybe a little bit less than that. A little bit closer to that, 55, we'll call that. Is that, or at least that's an estimation. Distances, if you said, 60, if you said 50, as long as you're not saying like 1,000, then obviously we're a little bit off. We want to get at least somewhat of a proper perspective of how big we're talking about with this. A little bit more from distances from Jerusalem to Jericho.
18 or so.
About 18, we'll give you that. Miss Julia, we'll say 15. So 15 miles from here, would that be about Kilgore? And probably not quite that far, or I'm still learning my East Texas distances, so something like that maybe. Sure, we'll call that that. Length of the Jordan River bed. So this is a little bit different from the whole thing from Mount Carmel or from Mount Hermon to the Dead Sea, but how long is the river bed? This has a little bit less, but I think it's 200 miles total of river. This is calling it 80. But what Miss Julia is referring to is the river cuts back on and forth on itself a lot more than I think maybe our maps emphasize or we realize. So it's about 200 miles of, if you were to, you can't walk a river, but I guess if you were to swim a river, you'd have about 200 miles of distance to cover there. What about the distance from the Jordan River to the Arabian Desert? So on the eastern side, how far is that distance approximately? About 30, 25 is what this is saying here. The distance from cities of Joppa to Gaza, where are these cities located? In the region of not Palestine, but close to that. Starts with an F, or starts with, well, it sounds like starts with an F, starts with a P. Philistines in there. How close are these cities together? You could try to use our little scale we've got up there if you had a fancy technology and rotate it. It's about 40 miles. And I think this is our last one. from the Lebanese River to Jezreel. So from the river up there at the top in the north by Phoenicia down to Jezreel, about 50. There we go. All right, we're getting into now, as we're looking at some of our final points, some cities, and then we'll look at some regions. I'm going to try to include more of y'all doing your pointing again. I think we'll start on this side again, on our team right side. This is the most northern city in Israel's usual control. What city would that be? Dan. We're approximately, if you're in a northern control, about somewhere around there. Very good. Over here, this is the best natural harbors in the land. Be thinking outside of Israel, the best natural harbors in the land on this side. It'd be right up in that way. Outside of Palestine, we would have, what did we say earlier for our Phoenician cities? Tyre and Sidon. We've got those two. Those are our natural harbors. But Jeff, I think this is our next one. Herod built an artificial harbor here. Caesarea, that's right. I asked you because that's the one you just mentioned. So Caesarea is there. What's Caesarea in our New Testament time period? Who's often traveling in and out of Caesarea as he's journeying about and in between shipwrecks and arrests and beatings? Who's doing work in and out of Caesarea? Paul is. We'll have some references and some scriptures for that here in just a minute. More cities. We're going to go back over to here. This is a city in the Negev that built around wells that Abraham dug. Abraham found some water here, led to some contention. Down in the Negev, so the Negev is down in the south, what city would this be? Beersheba is the name, if I remember, something about plenty of water or wells. Oh, I didn't give a chance for you to point, Vanessa. I'm sorry. She's relieved about that anyway, though, I think. So over here on this side, this is the city guarding the pass through the spur of Mount Carmel. This is a city that has a lot of important value politically, trade-wise, military-wise. What city would this be? Close to Mount Carmel. Not Caesarea. It starts with an M. Megiddo? I think someone just said. Who said that just now? Jeff, there you go. Very good. Where's Megiddo? Danny? Up north? You put a spot around there. There you go. Right there. This city is a great trading center of the Philistines. Over here on this side, we're looking for a Philistine city. Gaza. And about where would Gaza be, Vanessa? Not in the ocean. There we go. We're around a little bit farther south there, but that's in that Philistine territory around there. The last thing we have are some just various territories. So for everybody, before we get back to this side, for everyone, what are our 4 zones we use to divide the land in parallel north and south sections as we are thinking about these various typographies and geographic locales? So the first one is along the coast, known as the coastal plains. The next one in, they're all going to come in at the same time, so I'm going to wait to push the button. The next one in, east, is going to be the hill country. I think I heard someone mumble a second ago. The third one east in is the Valley Jordan, or the Jordan Valley. And then the last one, farthest east from the Mediterranean, is the Transjordan Plateau. So these are our territories, not necessarily listed like this in Scripture. Every once in a while you'll hear references to the hill country, or you may hear about the Jordan Valley. But these are just to help us as we're talking about these land and these areas. Sometimes we may even further on talk about as the people are getting ready to enter the promised land and Moses is leading them in Deuteronomy, he's going to be leading them through the Transjordan Plateau, getting ready to go to the Jordan Valley to cross into the hill country, something like that. Let's get back. I think we're over here on our team left side. This is the dry, rugged valley south of the Dead Sea. The dry, rugged valley south of the Dead Sea. The Arabah, that's how I would say that too. So Danny, where would that be? South of the Dead Sea. That's all right. I caught you off a little bit there. Uh-oh.
Oh, there it is.
That's Vanessa. She's helping you out some. There you go. You changed color on us all of a sudden. There we go.
My pointer went out.
That's all right. So with that, we got a couple more places to identify. This is the Hebrew name of the valley, meaning God's sowing. The Hebrew name of the valley that means God's sowing. We're not necessarily looking for an identification on a map, but a title. Jezreel. I had to go back and find that one. That's on page 12 of your workbook if you're interested in that. The counterpart Greek name for that, rather than the valley of Jezreel, is the name, the valley of Esrodon. Esrodon. I'm probably adding an H in there somewhere I'm not supposed to. We're going to call that Esrodon or Esrodonalin. You can pronounce that however you'd like to pronounce that if you want to pronounce that with using the Greek name. Back over here, we want to identify the central portion of the coastal plain. So the coastal plain can be divided up in a couple of different plains. You have the plains of the Philistines down in the southern part of the plains. If I remember right, the plains of the Phoenicians up in the Phoenician territory. But in that middle section, you have the plain of Sharon is our term there, right there in that middle area. This is the very dry and rugged area south of Canaan. We've referred to it a couple times already over here on our right side team. What's our desert area? Sometimes we just use this term to describe the desert south of Canaan. The Negeb or the Negeb, however you want to pronounce that. Where's our Negeb, Vanessa? Right there in that area. Over here, this is a term again. This is the name. Whoa, we're just shooting along for some reason. Danny, you pushing buttons again? No, Danny didn't want to do that question. That was the Cicero or the Cicero win. Danny, I think we want to take this question apparently. This is the very rugged slopes on the west side of the Dead Sea. So you're going to be right there in the western portion of the Dead Sea. What's the name for that area? It's kind of a wild area around Judah. What would we call that? The wilderness of Judah. That's right. If you've got your map, you can follow along there and see that. The wilderness of Judah, again, sometimes referred to in Scripture with that particular phrase. This is the name of the Jordan Valley that's used today. Just kind of a fact that was mentioned very early on in Lesson 4. Remember the name for that? El Gor is the name for that term today, or that area today. I'm going to identify the low rolling hills between the coastal plain and the hill country of Judea. You've got your map. You can find it on there from the workbook. Shephelah, kind of in between that more brown spot and the brighter green or the darker green. We're getting into some of our trade routes now. This is some of our last things. Over here, this is the trade route along the coastal plain. What's the name for that trade route? The way of the sea, or the way by the sea. The way of the sea, I think, is one term we can use for that, or we'll see that being used. This is the trade route that goes along the peaks of the mountain ridge on the west side of Jordan. So kind of cutting up through the middle of the land of Israel. This would be the trade route known as not Canaan's way, not the king's one. That's in a moment. The way of Shur. That's right, Brother Wayne. The way of Shur. This would be not necessarily if you're going all the way from Africa to Babylon, if you're going from Africa to Europe, maybe not necessarily the way you would go, but there'd be lots of Israelite people who would travel along this particular path. Our final trade route is this trade route that is along the Transjordan Plateau. The King's Highway will be over on that side. And then here, it just says additional review. Danny, are you going to be willing to part with your pointer for just a moment? Okay. Thank you very much, sir. So those trade routes for us, if I can find that up here, the way of the sea would be right kind of along the coast here, and then somewhere between or just south of the Sea of Galilee would cut up into this area. If I'm remembering correctly, the way of Shur is going to cut up more through the hill country, and again cross over the Jordan, and we'll eventually meet up with the King's Highway. If I can start this where I want it to. And we'll follow along this way. And on your map, you may notice all of those seem to end up merging around this area towards the city of Damascus. Damascus would be one of those terms we'll use somewhat interchangeably with Samaria, as it's the capital city of Samaria. We covered a lot of review things today, and that was hopefully helpful for you to get a better view of the land or continue to start to lock some of these things in. Thank you for accommodating me and willing to do some shuffling. I'm sorry, whenever I do this again, I won't do birthdays. Apparently that was the wrong way to do if I want to try to even out the class. Maybe I'll just leave everybody where they are. But from this, more importantly, what I want to try to emphasize is some of the things here. I'm going to have this handout, and I'll pass this out after class here. I'm going to go up and down the rows, and I'll be sending an email as well. This is just, I spent some time going through the main places we identified, and here are some Bible references that go with the place we talked about. And so if you want to think about, okay, I know where the Zered River is, but what happens there? Or the Kishon River, is that ever mentioned in Scripture? Here's at least one Scripture reference per location that you can look at. Now, obviously, there are some places that have lots of different references to them, but this allows you to start contacting or making points in our spider web of knowledge that's not just a map or not just a term for a review game when Jeff puts you on the spot to be a pointer, but this is something that helps you to put Bible knowledge with Bible locations. Help us then as we continue to experience the people and the story of God's plan of redemption and how these places maybe help shape these people and these people's influences and choices to either serve God or not serve God, some challenges they face based on their locations or the people around them that could help us out. So, next week we'll be getting into Lesson 6. We'll be doing a very generic study on the Old Testament land, so that'll be including places outside of Israel. We'll, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, mainly focus on places like Egypt, the nations to the east, and then the following lesson in Lesson 7, we'll get more into some of these New Testament lands and talk about some of the empires and places that are important in our New Testament time period. Maybe we'll look at some of the journeys of Paul on a big scale as well. But for now, I'm going to pass these out. That concludes our study and review for today. Continue to work in your workbook if you have one, and continue to use your maps, to use this information. Hopefully it's helpful for you. If you are today thinking, I wish I had a workbook, I can still provide that for you. If you want one, just let me know. We can get that going for you. But otherwise, that's our classroom this morning. Just some review today. Helps me to know where we are with some things. We'll continue on with Lesson 6 next week. Thank you all for your comments and for your participation and being a part of our class today. Feel free to move back to your home spots if you want to, and I'll pass these out, and we'll get going for our worship here in about 20 minutes or so.